I want you to go back in time for just a second. Picture yourself in maybe 4th or 5th grade.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, you know the setting. The fluorescent lights are humming, the room smells entirely like pencil shavings. And suddenly, the whole room just goes dead silent.
I can picture it perfectly.
You're standing at the front. Or actually, maybe you're sitting at your desk, but it feels like a literal spotlight just hit you. The teacher is holding up a piece of paper. Your paper.
And everyone is looking.
Everyone. And she doesn't scream. She doesn't hit you. She just turns the paper so the whole class can see the red ink. Maybe it's a test where you scored a 3. Maybe it's a note about your behavior. And she just asks one simple question. Look at this. Aren't you ashamed?
It's incredibly visceral, isn't it? I mean, even just hearing you say that, I can feel a physical reaction.
Right, your face just heats up.
Exactly. And the fascinating thing about the source material we're diving into today is how it pinpoints that exact specific sensation. Because in that moment, you don't cry. At least, not immediately. You don't run away. You just freeze. And your face starts to burn.
That heat, that very specific feeling of your cheeks getting hot while your stomach just drops into your shoes. That is exactly what we are unpacking today.
It's a heavy one.
It is. We've got a stack of research, some deep psychology notes, and honestly, some pretty heavy philosophical essays here that all revolve around that one single moment. Because it's not just about a bad day in a classroom.
No, it's much bigger than that.
We're looking at a very specific tool used in education and parenting. It's not physical punishment and it's not neglect. It's the use of shame as this precision instrument to manufacture progress.
It is a mechanism of control, fundamentally. And honestly, going through these sources for this deep dive, it was uncomfortable.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we've all been there, either as the child or, and this is the much harder part to admit, as the adult holding the paper.
Yeah, that's the uncomfortable truth.
So our mission today is to figure out the actual mechanics of that heat in your face. Why is shame such a nuclear weapon for compliance? And we're going to explore the big question the research poses here. Are we raising children who actually understand responsibility? Or are we just raising children who are terrified?
Let's start with the why, because if shame is so damaging, and we are definitely going to get to the damage, why is it the go-to move for so many teachers, parents, and even bosses?
Yeah.
The materials start with a really uncomfortable, provocative point.
Shame works. It really does. And we have to be honest about that up front. It is incredibly efficient.
Right.
Think about it. If you are a teacher with 30 unruly kids or a parent in a grocery store with a screaming toddler, you want the behavior to stop right now. You don't want to have a 10-minute philosophical discussion about impulse control.
You just want silence.
You want silence. And shame delivers silence almost instantly. A public humiliation sticks in the memory far longer than 10 gentle pieces of advice.
It's the hot stove effect. You touch the stove, you get burned, you just never touch it again. It's instant learning.
In a sense, yes. But the burn here is social, which, the research argues, is actually much worse than physical pain for a human being. We really have to look at the evolutionary context here.
The survival aspect.
Exactly. Shame is a social emotion. It signals one specific thing to your brain. It says, you are deviating from the norm.
And in prehistoric days, deviating from the norm didn't just mean you were, the quirky one. It meant you were probably going to get kicked out of the tribe.
Which meant death.
Yeah.
You cannot survive alone in the wild. So that burning face, that intense desire to just sink into the floorboards, that is your biological alarm system screaming at you, fix this behavior immediately, or you are going to die.
Wow, so when a teacher just casually asks, aren't you ashamed? They are literally hacking into a survival instinct that is millions of years old.
Precisely. They are leveraging the primal fear of abandonment to get you to sit down and shut up. It is an incredibly powerful lever. But this is exactly where we have to pivot to the cost. Because you do not use a weapon like that without massive collateral damage.
Right, and this is where the notes bring in Søren Kierkegaard.
The Danish philosopher, yes.
I just love that we are bringing 19th century existential philosophy into a discussion about a 4th grade math test.
It fits perfectly, though.
It really does, because Kierkegaard talked a lot about the self.
He did. And specifically, the text mentions his focus on the tension between how we see ourselves and how others see us. He called it the gaze of the other. When education heavily relies on shame, the child learns to navigate the world entirely through that external gaze.
They're just looking for reactions.
Right. They stop looking inward to understand why they should do something, and they only look outward to see if they are being watched. They learn to see themselves entirely through the eyes of other people.
Okay, let me try to ground this. So let's say I'm learning math. If I'm learning it for myself, I'm thinking, hey, I really want to solve this puzzle. But if I'm learning it to avoid shame,
Then the math is completely irrelevant.
right, the goal isn't learning math.
The goal is just satisfy the person looking at me so I don't feel that burning heat. You are completely outsourcing your self-worth.
That shifts the motivation entirely. You're not trying to improve anymore. You're just trying to survive the gaze.
And that survival mode leads to what Albert Camus, another philosophical heavy hitter mentioned in our sources, called silence.
Silence.
Yes. Camus suggested that humans can comply with a rule without truly accepting it. A shamed child learns to just be quiet. They stop asking questions.
Well, sure, because asking a question is dangerous.
Highly dangerous.
If I ask a question, I'm admitting I don't know something. And if I admit I don't know something, the teacher might roll their eyes or the class might laugh, and boom, I'm right back in the fire.
Exactly. Experimentation carries the massive risk of being wrong. And in a shame-based environment, being wrong is not just part of the learning process. It is a moral failure.
So you just shut down. You become the quote-unquote good student who is quiet, obedient, and literally never takes a single risk.
And that's the trick of it. To the outside observer, that looks like a remarkably well-behaved kid. Look how quiet Johnny is.
But inside, Johnny is just running a constant, exhausting risk assessment algorithm.
It is a profound tragedy of lost potential. The research asks a very uncomfortable question here. If a child learns only to avoid shame, are they actually developing a moral compass? Or are they just learning how to not get caught?
That is a huge distinction. And the text argues that this dynamic doesn't just stay neatly in the classroom, it bleeds out into everything. The source calls it the structure of humiliation in society. Because we see this everywhere, don't we?
We do. It's on the streets, it's all over social media, it's sitting right there at the family dinner table. The notes highlight these phrases we've all heard a million times.
Oh, yeah.
Things like, look at your cousin, see how well she eats. Or, aren't you ashamed to be wearing that at your age?
Ugh, the comparison game. Why can't you be more like your brother?
It's insidious, and this connects directly to Jean-Paul Sartre. The text brings in his concept of the look, or the gaze. Sartre argued that when you are looked at with judgment, you undergo a literal psychological transformation.
Okay, break that down for me.
You cease to be a subject, meaning a person with your own complex inner world, your own thoughts and feelings, and you become an object.
Subject versus object. Okay, how does a kid become an object in this scenario?
Think about a bug under a microscope. When a scientist looks at that bug, they aren't wondering if the bug had a bad morning or if it's trying its best to be a good bug.
Right, it's just a thing to study.
It's a specimen.
Yeah.
So when a parent or a teacher shames a child publicly, saying something like, look at him, look how messy his desk is, that child instantly stops being a human being to the other people in that room. They become an example.
Oh, I see. They become a walking billboard for what not to do.
Exactly. You are used as a prop. Don't be like him.
Yeah.
In that exact moment, your humanity is stripped away, and you are just a tool for the authority figure to control the rest of the group.
And the rest of the group falls right in line because they definitely don't want to be the billboard next time.
Correct. And the source argues there is a very deliberate, hidden logic to this societal structure. A fearful group is a very easy group to manage.
Oh, for sure.
If everyone is terrified of being the object of shame, they will not dare to step out of line. It creates order.
But it's a really brittle kind of order. It feels completely fake. The notes give these specific examples that just hit so close to home, like the student who gets called out for missing homework. There's no dialogue, no, hey, is everything okay at home? Just their name on the board for everyone to see.
Complete public exposure.
Right, or the parent comparing siblings in front of the whole extended family to label them, rather than actually explaining anything. It creates this heavy atmosphere where the absolute only thing that matters is appearance.
It prioritizes the appearance of order over the actual reality of the human being. And the result, according to the source material, is that this creates an entire generation that knows how to hide mistakes rather than how to think.
If the main goal is don't be the example of failure, then hiding your mistake is just as effective as not making one.
Exactly.
Which leads us to what I think is the deepest cut in this entire deep dive. The text calls it the existential fall. I really want to slow down here because this is the part that fundamentally messes you up for life. It's the critical difference between I did something wrong and I am wrong.
This is the crucial distinction. This is the exact pivot point where shame severely differs from guilt. Guilt is actually healthy.
Right, because guilt is about the action.
Yes. Guilt says, I made a mistake, I need to fix it. It focuses on the behavior. Shame says, I am a mistake. It focuses entirely on identity.
That is terrifying. Because you can fix a behavior. You can apologize, you can clean up the mess you made.
Yeah.
But how do you fix who you fundamentally are?
You can't. And that is exactly why shame leads directly to despair. The source describes this intense parallel conflict that starts raging inside the child.
The split.
Yes. One part of them desperately wants to fix the error, say. They want to study harder for the next math test. But another part of them starts to believe that fixing it is totally useless. Because if the flaw is in their nature, if they believe they are just naturally stupid or lazy or shameful, then no amount of studying will ever change that.
So they just give up. Or worse, they internalize it completely.
They internalize the message. Instead of this behavior is incorrect, the message becomes you are not good enough. And this brings us right back to Kierkegaard's idea of despair.
The inability to accept oneself.
Exactly. You become completely split. You have the mask that you show the world to avoid the gaze, and then you have the real you underneath that you honestly believe is fundamentally broken.
And the really scary part is, the teacher eventually retires. You grow up and move out, so the parent eventually stops scolding, but the voice doesn't leave.
No, it stays.
The notes call it the lingering voice. The external authority is gone, but the adult just continues to shame themselves. We become our own worst bullies.
That is the ultimate tragedy of this method. The external authority figure moves out and an internal tyrant moves right in. You become your own strictest teacher. The source gives an incredibly powerful real-world example of this, the successful failure.
Oh man, this one resonated with me so hard. The university student or the young professional. On paper, they are perfect. High grades, massive achievements, employee of the month, but inside, they are a nervous wreck.
Yes. The text specifically describes the student whose hands literally tremble during a presentation. And it's not from a lack of preparation. They probably overstudied by 10 hours. They know the material better than anyone in the room, but they are completely paralyzed by the fear of being exposed.
Exposed as what, though? They literally have the grades to prove they belong there.
Exposed as a fraud. Exposed as that shameful object they felt like back in 4th grade. They aren't afraid of the actual work. They are terrified of the gaze. They believe that if they stutter, or if they answer one question slightly wrong, the mask will slip and everyone will finally see that they are actually not good enough.
I think so many adults listening right now feel this deeply with perfectionism. The notes mention the professional who sends an email with a typo. Just a minor, insignificant typo.
Okay.
And they completely spiral.
Let's role play that spiral for a second. You send that email, you look at your sent box, and you see the typo. What is the immediate instinctive thought? Is it, oops, I made a small formatting error?
No, honestly. The thought is, oh my God, I look like an absolute idiot. They're going to think I'm totally unprofessional. They're going to think I don't care about my job. I'm going to get fired. It goes from 0 to worst case scenario in about 3 seconds.
Exactly, that extreme spiral, that is the shame mechanism at work. A healthy reaction is, I made a mistake. The shame reaction is, I am incompetent. And Kemma spoke directly about this, living under constant internal judgment. When you live your life like that, you become incredibly risk-averse.
Because new things are inherently messy?
Always. You stop creating, you stop trying new things to completely avoid the possibility of humiliation.
If I try something new, I might be bad at it at first. And being bad at it triggers the shame, so I'll just stick to the exact routine I know I won't fail at. Thank you very much.
You end up living your entire life just trying to prove you aren't bad, rather than actually discovering who you are. You shrink your world down to the size of your safety zone.
Living to prove you aren't bad versus living to find out who you are, that is heartbreaking. But, okay, we have to play devil's advocate here for a minute, because I know there are people listening right now thinking, okay, but kids need discipline. If we don't make them feel bad when they mess up, they'll just run wild.
The classic defense. The source addresses this directly as the pain argument. The idea is essentially, if it doesn't hurt, they simply won't remember the lesson.
Right.
And look, if you touch a hot stove, the pain definitely makes you remember. If you shame a child, they absolutely will remember the event. But the source asks a really critical question here. What exactly do they remember?
They remember the humiliation. They don't remember the lesson at all. I can tell you, going back to that memory of the test paper at the start of the show, I do not remember what was on that math test. I don't remember which fractions I got wrong.
Yeah.
I just remember the exact pattern of the floor tiles I was staring at while my face burned.
Exactly. The actual lesson is completely lost in the blinding glare of the shame. So what is the alternative? The source calls it the cost of mercy. And I really appreciate that phrasing because it admits something very important. Mercy is expensive.
Expensive how?
Hmm.
Like it takes a toll on the parent or teacher.
It takes time. It takes immense patience. The alternative to shame presented in the material is clearly separating the behavior from the person. It's sitting down and saying, that action was incorrect, we don't do that, and here's exactly why. It is firm, absolutely, but it actively protects the child's identity. It tells them, you are not shameful, but this specific behavior needs to change.
But doing that takes way longer than just yelling, aren't you ashamed of yourself?
So much longer. Acknowledging that not using shame is harder is part of the process. It might take 10 separate conversations to correct the behavior. It might take years of slow guidance. Shame is a shortcut to compliance. True understanding takes the scenic route.
And it requires the adult to regulate their own emotions first.
Yes.
That's the real kicker, isn't it? Because usually when we shame a kid, it's not because we have this grand, well-thought-out pedagogical strategy. It's because we are tired, we are stressed, and we just desperately want the noise to stop.
We often use shame because we feel helpless in that moment. It is an emotional reaction from the adult that is masquerading as discipline. But the source quotes Sartre again here, noting his view that humans are their choices in a situation, not just the blind result of the situation. True discipline fosters internal responsibility, not external fear.
We want a kid to think, I shouldn't do this because it harms others, not I shouldn't do this because I'm terrified of being laughed at.
Exactly. That shift from external fear to internal responsibility is everything.
But it requires us to accept that good behavior might look a little messier and take a little longer while they actually figure it out.
We have to tolerate the mess of learning. We have to allow them to be subjects who are allowed to make mistakes, rather than forcing them to be objects of perfection.
This has been a really heavy, deep dive, but I think an absolutely necessary one. Because we're not just talking about a classroom policy here, we're talking about the engine that runs a person's entire life. The source essentially argues that if you rely on shame, it becomes the primary engine. And it's a dirty fuel. It gets the machine moving, sure, but it clogs the system and eventually burns the whole thing out.
To summarize the tragedy of this style, it doesn't just happen once. It turns shame into a permanent state of being. And the ultimate philosophical inquiry the source poses at the end is one we all really need to sit with. Do we want a generation that behaves well because they truly understand or because they are terrified?
It reminds me of the difference between, say, a trained dog and a good person. A dog sits because he fears the rolled-up newspaper. A good person sits, or rather stands up, because they understand why it matters.
Precisely. And the damage to their identity is the real, lasting cost. If you spend your formative years believing you are always just one single mistake away from being completely worthless, that doesn't just magically evaporate when you get a high school diploma. It stays in the trembling hands during the board meeting. It stays in the late-night panic over an email.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with the final provocation directly from the source material. It's something to really mull over on your own today. If you were raised with shame as that primary tool, listen to the voice in your head right now. When you make a mistake, whose voice is it that repeats those harsh criticisms? Is it actually yours, or is it a ghost from 20 or 30 years ago?
And to build on that closing thought, if you make a mistake tomorrow, and you will because you are human, do you want to be corrected so you can learn, or do you want to be made an example of shame? The choice of how we treat ourselves and how we treat the people looking up to us is ours to make.
That is a powerful place to leave it. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Be kind to yourselves today, and maybe, if you can afford it, take the scenic route.
Take care, everyone.